Now I'm going to introduce our panelists who will join Dr. Langford in this discussion. First, we have Kevin Buehler, Senior Partner at McKinsey New York and CEO of Risk Dynamics. Kevin's expertise in the intersection of technology and business strategy will shed light on the economic impact of innovation in AI research. The use cases where AI technology matters and risk and barriers to adopting AI for business. Joining us is also Dr. Rachel Cummings, Associate Professor of Industrial Engineering and Operations Research at the Columbia University. Dr. Cummings is known for her pioneering work in data privacy, particularly in differential privacy. Her interdisciplinary approach, in privacy-preserving algorithm design is crucial in today's data-driven world. We are also privileged to have Dr. Ganesh, Distinguished Service Professor of Innovation Practice at Tepper School of Business, CMU. Mr. Mani's experience of combining AI with various industries, including his contributions to swarm intelligence, illustrates the vast potential of AI and enhancing human capabilities. And finally, we welcome Dr. Claudio Silva, Institute Professor of Computer Science and Engineering of NYU Tandon School of Engineering. Dr. Silva's work in visualization, geometric computing, and urban computing, particularly in the development of intelligent AR assistant, represents the cutting edge of technology applications. Ladies and gentlemen, as we delve into this discussion about the future of technology, its opportunities and challenges, please join me in welcoming this panel of our distinguished experts.
Okay, so I thought maybe we'd ask a question of each of you to kind of help let you introduce. So Claudio, you have this Argus system that I guess you've worked on. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that and how you see that developing with AI.
Sure. So I'm Claudio Silva. I'm at NYU. So John, for the past about 3 years, we've been working on trying to, as part of like this bigger effort. It's actually this is part of this big DARPA project. I'm not speaking on behalf of DARPA here. This is obviously has nothing to do with everything I say here is my opinion, right? So, what we're trying to do in a way is to build an assistant, kind of like, in a way, think of like ChatGPT, but that actually can understand the world and physical to help with physical tasks. So the difference here is actually kind of like, you want to develop a system that can guide a human and can understand what the human is doing by seeing what the human sees, by hearing what the human hears, and actually by having access to the same kind of instructions, right? Yeah, so in a way, like one of the ways that usually I try to summarize this to people, and in science fiction is we've seen Jarvis from Iron Man, right? So effectively, imagine how you would try to build a Jarvis. That's what we've been trying to do.
So related to what I was talking about earlier, this is about digitization of things that are not presently digitized. And that opens up the space for solutions which are learned in software in that space.
So let me try to unpack a little bit what you're saying. So if we think of what you were talking about before about ChatGPT, that it basically, for the most part, although it actually does, there is versions of it that is actually using images and videos now. But imagine that you actually would embed into the AI the ability to see the embodied world, right? And you digitize it, So that's what you would like to do, right? There's actually a step, a little bit, there's even like a little gap here in that one of the issues is that when you're trying to build an assistant, you're trying to understand what the person that it's trying to assist is doing in order to be able to assist it. And this actually is one of the big challenges, is because the uncertainty associated with humans and what humans do, right, creates that even if I imagine, even if the assistant kind of like knew what all the instructions were and all of those were digitized, this is actually another gap of the challenge of trying to build such AI.
Great, thank you. Rachel, you've worked on differential privacy and you're at Columbia University. What are your thoughts about where privacy and AI intersect and synergize or contain?
Good. So I'll start by giving a little bit of context about the privacy notion that I work with, which is called differential privacy. If you haven't heard of it, it's not very common in the mainstream, but it is being used in most of your devices. And this is a privacy notion where we say, I want to have learned the same thing even if I never saw your data. And so we like imagine the real world with you and a counterfactual world without you. And if we can say, I would have learned the same thing in this counterfactual world. I'm not learning from you, I'm learning from the population. And this is exactly our goal. We want to learn causal links between smoking and lung cancer without like, overfitting to your specific health record. In the tech space, this is really important as we talk about like word predictions, emoji predictions. And these are used Google, Apple, Microsoft, Uber, parts of the US government. It's like really mainstream, but it's not a very like a sexy topic, and so people don't really talk about it, but it's totally being used. It is mostly being used for kind of like analytics, and it's like what websites crash Chrome the most, so then we can fix that bug. There's now a question as we're moving into the AI space, how can we connect privacy with these like AI models? If they train it on a corpus that includes things I wrote on the internet a decade ago, are my MySpace posts going to be embedded into GPT-5? Should I be worried about that? And so there's a privacy question there, and we're seeing the same question manifest now in these copyright questions, which are also asking, is there something specific in the input that belongs to one person and we don't want to be produced directly in whole or in part in the output? And so I think even though the questions are not necessarily about privacy, it's the same underlying question.
Thank you. Ganesh, you're in the business school at CMU. You've been thinking a lot about these things with the classes you teach. Can you tell us a little bit about where the things are?
Sure. At Tepper, I'm actually teaching experiential learning. So last fall, we covered digital twins, generative AI, and collective intelligence. So those are some contemporary themes at the frontier of analytics, if you will. And this semester, they're putting all of those together with capstone. So I think we have about 120 students, about 30 capstone projects from industrial giants. You were talking about the Port of Singapore. I think one of the greatest innovations in the atoms world, we're primarily talking about bits, is the container. So one of the sponsors of capstone is Maersk, the Danish logistics giant. And the container, if you think about it, we've actually adopted it in the digital world as well. It's one of the greatest innovations. So how do you put all these things together and do learning by doing? So a lot of these folks are already using Copilot the new AI is augmented intelligence. I have my graduate student friend and now professor at NYU. When Matt and I went to graduate school, this is Wisconsin, where bovine engineering, so I'd go to a hairdresser or bartender would say, oh, you're doing AI, I know what it means. Isn't it artificial insemination? That was sort of the, now the same barber or the bartender knows what AI is. They're asking, is my job going to be disintermediated, right? So this sort of scaling of expertise, and if you have certain jobs that are going to be disintermediated, or they're new jobs, or they're sort of drone controllers, or they're trucking folks who can sort of navigate the last mile, right? Imagine pulling up an 18-wheeler to unload something right here, right? That could be done using a joystick from Klamath Falls, and so on. So that's, I think, what we're sort of thinking about. I think it's fun days, it's early days, but the good news is you don't, sorry to disagree with John a little bit, you don't need a PhD in computer science to be involved in this. You can be a liberal arts major, you can be a designer, you can be an econ specialist, and econ's interesting, right? It's a weak theory or low theory domain. Nobody knows how the economy works, so you can experiment with these powerful tools, and maybe you'll come up with something that's very useful. So let me sort of stop there, and we can continue on the discussion with some questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Ganesh. Not actually disagreement, by the way. Kevin, you work at McKinsey and are deeply involved in AI and business. I'd love to get your take.
Thanks, John. So at McKinsey, we have about 200 clients we're serving right now on generative AI, and even more on AI and digital technology more broadly. Let me tell you a little bit about what we see as the use cases that are available right now that can make a difference for businesses. And let me first start by sizing this. We had McKinsey Global Institute, which is, think of our internal think tank, look at all the different industries in society, all the different functions on a global basis, and all the different tasks that people do. And we think just with current technology, there's a $2.6 trillion to $4.4 trillion opportunity, just if we just stayed static at where we are today. For context, that means pulling forward about 8 years of technology development and impact. So it would have taken another 8 years with the previous analytical and digital and machine learning capabilities to solve things use case by use case versus what is going on now. Some of my colleagues like to say GPT is a GPT, meaning generative pre-trained transformers, which is what ChatGPT is general purpose technology, meaning it's broadly applicable. Think electricity and all the changes that occurred when electricity came into being. So really quite powerful force. We see 4 different categories of use cases that we're helping our clients implement. Number 1 is what we call customer journeys. They all begin with C, just to make it easier for me to remember. So customer journeys, think about the last time you had to interact with a customer service agent, to change your cable bill or put a new service into place. This morning, we sponsored a family to come here from Ukraine. I had to get renter's insurance. I went to Lemonade, which is a great company, and for $13 a month got a new policy, but I already had an account and I wanted to change the email address on the account. I am pretty sure it was a chatbot that I was interacting with, even though they gave it a human name, right? And it worked pretty well, and I was pretty happy at the end of the day with response time and interpretation. So all these customer journeys and interactions, either you're going to be interacting with a chatbot or the customer service agent on the other side of the phone is going to be managing 20 conversations aided by a chatbot. That's one. That's easy. That's now. Number 2 is coding. John mentioned GitHub Copilot. There is a huge productivity boost for some pretty expensive folks. Every software engineer really, if they haven't already started, will be using some sort of generative AI tool in coding. And it's not just writing new code, that's good. It's documenting old code, which programmers hate to do and don't do very well. It's creating unit tests so that the code can be sure when you change one thing, it doesn't break over here. And it's taking legacy systems and modernizing them, because we don't have a lot of COBOL programmers left, and you guys don't really want to study COBOL, right? So coding is a huge impact. We see 30 to 55% productivity improvements. That's a lot, right? Number 3 is what we call concision. I also think about this as virtual experts or retrieval augmented generation. And McKinsey created their own tool in this space. I'll give you an example of what it does. We called it Lily after one of the first female partners at McKinsey & Company. And what Lily does is it looks through, in a semantic search, 60,000 curated documents that we've put together over time. A lot of them are PowerPoint, which created its own challenges. Don't use PowerPoint. But we figured out how to interpret those. Actually, GPT-4V is pretty good for that. We also supplemented it with data, things like Edgar SEC filings and other public data sources. And now when a business analyst, which is a post-college person, or an associate, which is a postgraduate school person, wants to do something, the first thing they do is often turn to Lily, and Lily can grab the data, synthesize an answer, usually in text right now. I'm working to give Lily computational powers, either with Code Interpreter or Wolfram, lots of different approaches there. I'm working to help it produce PowerPoint documents and Tableau and other different types of output. But we will make our business analysts and associates and engagement managers and associate partners much more productive than they otherwise would be. In the first 2 weeks when we launched this, 50,000 people used it. Today we've had 1.4 million prompts and answers. I now have very good transparency into what all of my colleagues are doing, 45,000 colleagues are doing just from this data, which I never had before. So that's really powerful. And the last one is content generation. So think of, yes, it's all the birthday poems people write or travel planning people do, but those aren't the high value use cases. It's really the marketing and sales work, the email creation, legal contracts. If you want, do you guys know what a simple agreement for future equity is, a SAFE? How many of you know what that is? Okay, when you go into the VC world and you get your pre-seed round, you're gonna do a SAFE because YC, Y Combinator, started that trend a few years back. If you say, I want to do a SAFE with a 20% discount and a 7 million cap post money, I can get a computer to print out that contract and it'll be 80% perfect. There were a lot of associates in law firms who spent a lot of time doing that on the West Coast, right? Generating content is easy. So my last point here is, how many of you use what I'll call a frontier model, which is basically GPT-4 right now, and eventually will be Google Gemini Pro and Gemini Ultra, but how many of you use a frontier model on a daily basis? Okay, all of your hands should be up. The easiest thing you can do is get familiar with this technology. It's remarkably accessible. How many of you have written a GPT and put it in the GPT store? Okay, a few, that's good. Took me 15 minutes to write something called Modern Shakespeare GPT. It was in the store. It was the #1 Shakespeare GPT when I put it there. It's now the second. So if you go there, look it up. But what does it do? It's super simple, but it says, here are a list, its default prompt is, here's a list of Shakespeare's most popular plays, pick one. Okay, Henry V. Here's a list of 5 great scenes. Here's the St. Crispin's Day speech. I'm gonna list all the words from the original Shakespeare text, and I'm gonna translate it to modern English. I'm gonna give you a little commentary. I will tell you, before I went to London to see Henry V performed, it was super helpful to me in actually understanding what was going on. But play with these things, 15 minutes for me to create that, and maybe 2 hours of fine-tuning since then in order to make it work. By the way, it had memorized all of Shakespeare. I didn't even have to do retrieval augmented generation. So play with this technology. It will pay off in all sorts of ways we don't understand now.
Thank you. So I have some questions here, but in general, this is a new thing, and so I'd really like to get questions from you guys. Are there questions that you have right now? Yes. We'll try to go through them. Go ahead.
So Professor Langford just mentioned there's still a gap between human and a well-trained AI model today. Can you explain more about the gap? Like, I'm a philosophy student. I'm particularly curious about what about human experience that is so unique and irreplaceable, that is so difficult for a well-trained machine to understand and mimic. Is there anything replaceable? I don't know.
So I don't know if there's anything irreplaceable, but a very simple thing that you can do to break GPT-4 is ask it to solve like a Sokoban-like puzzle. Sokoban, just you need to, it's like a pattern you need to handle. So things which have some sort of combinatorial lock that you need to think through in order to figure out how to solve the puzzle, it can't really do that. And the key issue is just that it doesn't have the, you need to have a loopy computation. So you try something, didn't work, okay, next thing, didn't work. And so if you're doing that as a human, you can just keep the context and keep doing that. But if you're GPT-4, the way it works is you have a circuit. And the circuit has some depth. I don't know exactly what it is, but some depth. And it's easy to blow through that depth. And then you can't simulate a loopy computation anymore. So these are the kinds of things where there's still a substantial gap in terms of what the bare models can do versus what a human could do.
Are you saying like humans have more situational and contextual understanding of the conversation, which ChatGPT currently doesn't have that contextual understanding?
Partly I'm saying that. I'm saying that humans are much better at holding context than these things are. And so even if you try to create a Lang chain or autogen loop around these things and invoke them over and over again, they can do better, but they can still kind of, they don't hold context that well. And so right now there's still, for kind of loopy reasoning type things, I would expect a human can do better than GPT-4.
I see, thank you. So you're saying humans have this, like human conversation, we have this stability or predictability in that conversation, which machine may not have.
Yeah, so if you're a philosophy major, I think part of it John already answered, and you're too young, so you may not have heard of have you heard of the Chinese room argument?
Chinese what argument?
Chinese room argument. So this is something that was talked about quite a bit a couple of decades ago. So just Google Searle's, S-E-A-R-L-E's Chinese room argument. The reason I bring that up is a lot of ChatGPT related things. One of the criticisms, one is something John addressed, the context window and all that. The other one is sort of grounding and the situational awareness. Does it know about actions? Does it know about things that are in the real world, embodiment, as opposed to Searle's argument was it's all squiggles in, squiggles out, right? You give it English, it returns the Chinese translation. It doesn't really understand the computer, the entity behind the green curtain, if you will. And I think we have a couple of experts who have worked on grounding and embodiment. So let me turn the microphone over to Claudio and perhaps Rachel. They can wax eloquent on it. But I think that's an important concept, especially as a philosophy major. You'll appreciate it. Claudio, you want to?
Sure, but I think grounding is certainly an important thing, but my impression is that So John's example is actually more about the fact that imagine what you need to do. You take a problem that you're trying to solve, and then you just look at all the steps that you would need to go through to solve your problem, right? So one of the issues that happen right now is that the current systems have a limited number of steps that they can think ahead, okay? And what happens is that this creates this limit, right? That humans, so humans actually, this is kind of a funny thing, right? So for humans, what happens is that you also, it seems people actually also have a limit on the number of steps and even on their short-term memory on what they can do. But one of the things that as humans we do is that we naturally create abstractions. So when a human is solving a problem and then they don't, and then they see that their kind of like limited memory cannot find the solution, it will try to create an abstraction that then makes the problem a little bit easier in terms of these steps, and then it recurs, okay? Right? So far, systems are not able to do that, right? That's, that is actually like a key limitation of existing systems. Does this help?
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it.
And I want to maybe add on a little bit to that, which is there's a question, what is a GPT-4 bad at? And I think while that's an important question, there's a much bigger question, which is what can generative AI not do? And really, the limitations of like a GPT-4 are about this specific model with a specific amount of training data and the specific amount of compute and memory and so on. There was a GPT-2, 3, 3.5, and those ones didn't perform as well because they had less data, less training, and less memory and everything. And they continue getting better, and they're not going to stop anytime soon. And so that's also important to think about. The reason why we have amazing text AI is because we have a very large corpus of a data on which we can train on the internet. The reason why we have DALL-E is because there are lots of pictures on the internet. And so really it becomes back to John's example, how do you explain how to throw a ball? It's hard to do that with AI now because we don't have a very good training data set explaining how do you throw a ball. If we had that, it would be great at it. And so that's really the only limitation I see.
I think that's right. All right, there was another question here at the beginning. Maybe we can, hold on, there's a microphone in the way.
Thank you. First of all, thank you all the guest speakers for giving this super informative talk. And I'm Yuming. I'm currently an MBA student at Columbia. And I have a question for Kevin. Since you mentioned about Lily, the internal AI use tool, I'm wondering how is the use of Lily that's being communicated with the clients that McKinsey have? And also, I'm wondering how do McKinsey clients actually react with the delivery with the aid of Lily?
Great question. We are showing how Lily works to our clients. So they're very curious. Actually, a few of our clients have said, hey, can you please build that for us and use our internal data to make it smart about our company? I'm going to give you a very small example. Put all our human resources policies here so an employee can ask questions about vacation days. Or you're a bank in a regulated environment, let's load up all the laws and regulations and rules and guidelines that apply to us, and let's have our compliance folks have full access to that, right? So that's happening right now, so they're curious. You might think that eventually clients will say, hey, your folks are much more productive than they used to be, therefore let's renegotiate, how much it costs to do all this. That hasn't happened yet. I'm sure some head of strategy somewhere is going to do that calculation in the next year, and that'll be interesting. I'm not very worried about that because our folks are getting more productive, and it's the boring work that falls off, right? And if they can go home at 9 o'clock instead of 11 o'clock on a really tough night, that's actually really good for everybody, right? They're sharper in the morning. I would say right now the real push is to figure out how we can do more and make this tool more helpful, not to replace our people, because frankly we need to have future partners train up in our apprenticeship model, and we don't know lots of good ways to do that other than have them do the work and work their way up. But I think the nature of the work they'll do, I will tell you, I serve a number of law firms, and they're a little more worried. I was a lawyer before I was a consultant. I worked at a firm called Cravath, which is a good law firm, and there was a lot of time, I'd say 80% of my time was processing words in contracts and documents to do a deal. I think this will change the economic of the legal industry quite a bit, and faster than a lot of other places. So I think there's going to be a lot of disruption. I think there will be more economic opportunity than economic displacement, but it won't always be the same people. So it's not a Pareto improvement. You got to make policy changes to help the people who are displaced.
So Kevin, can I add to her question?
Please.
So you mentioned using Lily by putting your documents there, and then your clients want that you put their documents. One of the things that I'm wondering here, in particular, when people are actually, one thing is for all of us to use this for like everyday tasks that but I remember I was playing with this thing, and I asked it to summarize some text for me. And then it literally, and this was just like trying to summarize like a couple of paragraphs, and it invented a whole bunch of different things. It said that things were happening. This thing had to do with like geography, so it invented cities that were not part of the original set. It added properties that were not there, right? So how do you handle this if someone is putting like the rules from some, whatever, like, so how do you assign, how do you handle this kind of conflict?
So I think that, hallucination or confabulation does occur. And I think it's a feature of these models, in some ways, as in their current architecture. We address that in a few different ways. One, the more grounded you are, so if you put a document into the context window and have it read that document, it does better. It's also a little boring, just to be honest. If you put the wrong document in, it does a really bad job. So I asked a question about, tell me all about the bank capital rules and the changes going on right now. It found a 7-year-old document on Saudi Arabian bank capital rules and gave me a dissertation on that, which was completely useless because I cared about the Basel Endgame in the US and not Saudi Arabia 7 years ago. So, if you give it the wrong information or it picks in a semantic search the wrong document, that's a problem. I think we always keep a human in the loop for now. So, I always want a professional, to go back and check the work that you're getting. But I will tell you, people get lazy and complacent. So once they see something that does like a 99.5% job, they stop checking. So I really think there are some approaches. I've been using adversarial tools. So one model produces the output, another checks the output in independent instantiation. But I also have found that the models are getting better. And GPT 3.5, I got a lot of hallucination. GPT 4, I get less. And the models are all moving up. There are now 6 or 7 companies with models that have better performance on this dimension in particular than GPT 3.5 did. I expect, watch the chatbot arena leaderboard. I think the top model there is GPT-4 Turbo at about 1250 ELO points right now, if any of you are chess players. You know, I think we're going to get to 1350 or 1400 before year end. I think GPT-5 will get there. I think Gemini Ultra will get there. Mistral has a decent chance. Claude from Anthropic has a decent chance. And I think they will find ways to reduce this level of hallucination and confabulation. But I don't trust it completely. And on life, you know, on life-threatening decisions, on things that are, you know, going to a very senior audience, I make sure there's a human who actually checks everything that we're doing.
Thank you so much for your answers.
I think we only have time for a very short question. One more.
Okay, one more question. Let's go here.
Thanks. Hi, thank you so much for everything you shared. And my name is Rachel, and I mainly look at pre-seed and seed round startups. And I know there's been this ongoing debate about GPT-4 wrappers. And I know for users or customers, they don't really care about if you're GPT-4 wrapped or if you have your own in-house model. All they care about if you solve their problems, what's your solution to their problems and the experience you're giving them. So I think so many people may say okay, what happens when GPT-5 comes out? Because back in 2020, we know GPT-3 only cost 6 cents per 1K tokens, and now even cheaper and better models are coming out. So, but many people may argue that if you're it doesn't really give you a moat if your GPT-4 model or your in-house model can do the same thing. So what are your suggestions for early stage startups on whether if they should deploy or fine-tune their own LLMs or if they should just go for a GPT-4 model? Thank you.
So just some comments here. There's a huge amount of activity in training these models going on. And the Pareto frontier at the lower compute scale has been pushed out substantially. So I would point out the Mistral model and the Phi model as being kind of really pushing the Pareto frontier of performance at small scale and thus cheap compute. And so I guess for random startups trying to solve individual applications, I would suggest not training your own models, but potentially fine-tuning them. I've seen evidence that fine-tuning these models is actually not hard. It can even be done at perhaps even single machine scale. And fine-tuning can have great performance improvements on some tasks. Yeah, Kevin?
I agree, John. I think that's exactly right. I mean, usually there are a few choices you have, which is prompting, RAG, or retrieval augmented generation, fine-tuning, and then building your own model, from scratch. Bloomberg built their own GPT. We'll see how that pays off, right? But I would say I'm with John. I think somewhere between RAG and fine-tuning is probably where the market is right now, and the tools to do that are increasing quite a bit. The other thing I'll say, if you're investing in this space, a GPT-4 wrapper does not have a moat. I think you're right. I would try to think about what are the industry verticals where you have real knowledge, or the functions where you have real knowledge and distinctiveness, where you're automating a business process end to end, as opposed to just a chatbot with a little better understanding than the last model out there.
Other comments, Ganesh?
Yeah, real quickly, I think you want to be one, problem and solution centric, not tool centric. So you want to be thinking about, is this a high stakes or low stakes use case? Is this a high value, low value use case? And the world is going to transition to sort of a multi-human, multi-machine teaming framework, right? So you want to be able to use sort of the right tools. It may be GPT-4 Turbo in combination with some causal model, right? Simple causal model, or I remember this phone a friend in the Millionaire show, right? You call the right friend, right? If it's something to do with Lego blocks or Disney princesses, you may actually call your kids, right? Like a 5 or 6-year-old probably would have the right answer. So you want to be thinking about different kinds of ensembles and who to gate it to. And I think the human in the loop still works for high value solutions and so on. So that solution architecture is what will give you the moat, I think.
I think that most of the things were covered, but I would say this is actually very application dependent, right? For some applications, some of the simpler open source models might be all you need, right? So don't ignore those either. There is a lot of things that you can do with those that you might not be able to do with things like GPT-4 just because of cost.
Rachel, any comment?
No. I'm an academic. I don't know how like real world companies work.
Okay. All right. My understanding is that we are unfortunately out of time. I will be around a bit afterwards, though, if you want to chat more.